I'm Melissa Chan. Thanks for joining us. It has been exactly 6 months since the Halloween night disaster in Seoul, South Korea, when some 160 people died in a crowd crush in the popular party district of Itaewon. Big questions remain about why so few police officers were on duty that night and why emergency workers failed to respond in a timely manner. For one family who lost their son, the tragedy has been compounded by online abuse, simply for demanding government accountability. As a warning, this report contains references to suicide and death, which some viewers may find distressing.
Cho Mi-yeon can no longer hug her son. His clothes will have to do. I love you so much, she says. Lee Ji-han died in the crush during Halloween celebrations last October in downtown Seoul. Cho longs to see him again. Some days, she plays a song he recorded for her birthday. Lee's father mourns in his own way. He stands outside the family's apartment for hours at a time, just like he did that night, waiting for his son, who never returned. His wife says he's tried to commit suicide several times.
I don't understand how this happened to us, and I feel like the sadness grows as time goes on. I thought that as time passed, the sadness would decrease and the memories would fade. But rather, sadness only grows and memories become clearer because I must know the truth about that day.
6 months on, the family feels no closer to that truth. And after publicly demanding answers from politicians, they say they've been targeted by online abusers who mock their grief.
They've said things like, "Those kids went to play at a ghost party for Halloween. Why should we mourn that? Are you trying to make money off your dead children's bodies?" Wherever I go, I am stabbed in the heart with such hateful comments off and online.
Lee Jong-chol is now a well-known face of the Itaewon families. They hold regular protests in front of the narrow alley where their children died. They want to know details from that night, why more wasn't done, despite emergency calls that disaster was imminent. Experts say Seoul's conservative government is worried such criticism could hurt them at the ballot box. For Lee and Cho, it's a double tragedy that's nearly unbearable. A walk through the alley where their son died brings their grief to the surface again.
For bereaved families like us, the secondary abuse by citizens and politicians is stabbing our hearts.
At this nearby memorial wall, they do find notes offering love and support. But it's little comfort when so much about the night their son died still remains unknown.
Joining us is journalist Se-woong-koo. Thanks for coming on the program. Se-woong, we've been reporting on President Yoon Suk-yeol's visit to the U.S. this past week, where it's been all smiles and lots of success. But it's been more, in terms of on the home front, more trouble for him, some of it because of this Itaewon tragedy. Can you talk to us about where things stand when it comes to government accountability?
Well, the Itaewon tragedy, as you know, has been one of the greatest disasters to happen in South Korea in the last several years. perhaps on the same level of significance as the 2014 ferry sinking that claimed more than 300 lives. Because in this case, in Itaewon too, many of the victims were young people in their 20s and some in their 30s. So the impact on Korean society and politics has been tremendous. And of course, as many things tend to be in South Korea, any situation of this significance is going to cause a great deal of political divide. The government has been quite adamant from the beginning that the responsibility for the disaster does not extend to the highest levels of the administration. But of course, the opposition argues that the greatest blame lies with the president himself. And we have seen for the last several months this political bickering taking place and perhaps taking even precedence over what exactly happened in Itaewon on that day at the end of October last year.
What are the victims' families demanding?
Well, their demands are quite straightforward. They would like to have a memorial dedicated to the victims, either in the vicinity of Itaewon itself or maybe somewhere more politically significant. And also they are calling for what they call a full and transparent investigation into the government's handling of the disaster. Actually, the government itself had its own investigation that concluded in January, and they ended up charging about 20-some people with various charges, but mostly dereliction of duty. We're talking about kind of low to mid-level officials from the police and the fire station located around the Itaewon and Yongsan area, which includes Itaewon. But the question, of course, is this really enough? Or are there higher ups in the government, for example, the interior minister, who should also be held accountable and perhaps lose his job? And that is something that we're certainly not seeing at the moment.
Not seeing at the moment, but how likely might it happen in the future?
Well, as these things tend to go, it's probably not very likely. You must understand that in South Korea, there is a considerable number of people who believe that the government, in fact, should not be held accountable because, one, this is an event that was not formally or officially organized by any government entity. And there are also people who argue that should the government be called responsible whenever there are young people going out and ending up in trouble. And I'm certainly not saying that I agree with these people, but this perspective is certainly there and it has been very vocal.
Can we also talk a little bit about online harassment culture in South Korea? What this family in the report we just aired goes through, it reminds me as an American of the experience of Sandy Hook families, the school children from that mass shooting, and then what those parents had to deal with online, denials that their children ever died and terrible stuff like that. Is harassment culture online a serious issue in South Korea?
It is serious and it is extreme. Korea is such a wired country. I mean, we're looking at almost 100% in terms of mobile phone usage in South Korea. Most people are online. Twitter is very popular, and that's where you will see a lot of this harassment that you're describing. And again, going back to the theme that I raised earlier, the fact that this disaster has become so politicized, it means that you will see supporters of the government going after the families, and they see any demand for transparency or accountability as a direct attack on the administration, and they will go to the fullest extent possible to discredit the families. And then, of course, you will see the other side of the political spectrum, supporters of the opposition, who will be leveling attacks on the government using also quite extreme language. So, yes, I think it is appropriate to draw a parallel between the situation and what happened with the Sandy Hook family in the U.S.
Seung-koo, thank you so much for joining us on the program.